dive into the topic right away, what you basically can see on the first page is a definition of what Web3 actually is. So anybody has a different understanding of that. There are, and I think the most known examples of Web3 applications are actually cryptocurrencies and partly NFTs, but there's much more about it. And if we look at it from a more holistic aspect and angle, and also how corporates look at it, is that they're basically saying, yes, the key fundamental aspect of Web3, that is the infrastructure is decentralized, moving away from one central dependent system, proprietary system, to a more open and decentral system. And the way how information is exchanged can happen in a blockchain-based technologies, again, where decentrality is the key function. But Web3 is more. It's also about how information is currently stored and logged, to allowing more machine-readable formats and to allowing machine learning algorithms and AI to make meaning out of words. And the latest examples of ChatGPT are just a few of them. But also on the interface layer, what we see is that now increasingly you don't only have human-to-machine communication, but increasingly machine-to-machine communication. And in particular in mobility, when we talk about smart cities, when we talk about seamless mobility, modal mobility, where you want to change from a car to a bus to a train, where you want to have different suppliers and operators working together, the ability to communicate from a machine, from a vehicle to a charging point, from a bus to a traffic light, becomes more and more important. And the fundamental idea is that Web3 enables everything of that. Now, how big is that opportunity and how quickly is that ramping up? What we currently see is that if you only count the crypto users as a proxy of usage of that technology, we currently roughly count about 300 million people who have or trade basically cryptocurrency, but we expect by 2030 that it will be at least 1 billion users. And the revenues which come out of that, not only out of trading, but now in general by providing solutions and technologies in the Web3 stage and space, will grow to more than 80 billion euros. Now, I talked about the advantages of that, and I don't want to spend too much time on the tech stuff. We can dive deeper into that if you have specific question on the actual benefits of the Web3 technology. I think what is more interesting is actually how quickly is that actually now ramping up. And here's an attempt to define, and anticipate how quickly this will evolve. Now, what you can see here on the top bottom corner is basically the internet, Web 1, which we call Internet of Information, started somewhere in the 1990s. And then with Web 2 coming up around 2005, around social media and Facebook and you name it, was basically, or is still the main dominant way of how media is consumed and internet is working. Now what we expect now, looking at these adoption curves, also how quickly users ramp up, that we expect now in the next 5 years to achieve some kind of tipping point where Web3 usage will go way beyond financial services and will basically be applied in all kinds of industries, be it in the industrial space, in the automotive space, but also for cities. If you move into, what can you actually do with that, and how quickly and why is it relevant to cities and mobility, we need to think and understand a bit better of what's driving change in mobility. And what you can see here is basically 5 fundamental trends, which all require more coordination of multiple players and agents. So there is the trend around electric vehicles and the new coordination between vehicles and charging stations. There's a topic around smart mobility, mobility as a service apps, which bring together different players in one app. And everybody knows the struggle you still have often, that if you are in a new city, you don't know which app to use, you download different apps, they don't work, and you're basically lost, and you cannot really use the mobility services which are actually at hand. Autonomous driving, obviously, as soon as vehicles are on the road, they start to need to communicate with each other, with the traffic lights, with other infrastructure. Software-defined vehicle, so driving more in-vehicle experiences, apps, app stores in the car, and ultimately sustainable cities who try to more efficiently allocate goods and people through the city. Everything of these trends require quite a few people to interact with each other, and we believe that Web3 is really one key technology solution to make that to make that happen. We see already quite a few use cases coming up, and what I picked here is just a few examples. So the digital battery passport is one example. In the European Union, with the Digital Product Passport Act, every physical product at some point needs to have a digital twin. And in particular now in the battery space by 2026, everybody needs to be able to understand what's the state of health of my battery, where were the raw materials sourced, was there child labor involved, and what happens with my battery afterwards. Now you have different players and OEMs. I saw Kia here right next door to us, and Mercedes and others, and they all have different battery technologies. But is there a way to standardize the information around the batteries and then enable every consumer to take an informed decision about, which car do I want to buy, depending on the ESG criteria of my battery? There are other examples around charging, V2X charging, and maybe we also speak later about this a little bit more, but also fun parts like gaming. And there are in-vehicle games where you can then collect coins and credits and even trade NFTs. And that's why we are here today. Also more in the public transit space, there are now new solutions coming up, and Wheelcoin is basically one of the leading applications in that space, and that's why I'm also super happy to have Boyd here in a minute to talk a bit about his mission and journey on how they got to that space. Now, before we dive into that, one last point. Everybody might have heard about the so-called crypto winter. So if you look at the Bitcoin capital market capitalization, you basically saw it was peaking like until 2022, trading around $60,000 one Bitcoin, and then it dropped basically to around 20,000 euros in December. And there was this event in January when ChatGPT now and AI came up, that basically a lot of the investors who used to praise Web3 were now all trying to get into the ChatGPT hype. And there's this picture which went viral showing investors trying now to pivot into ChatGPT and AI applications. Now the question is Web3 now really dead? I don't think so. And if you look at now also how cryptocurrencies are recovering, there's a positive trend upwards now again. We believe, however, it needs a more foundational approach on actually how to do that. And we need to enable cities and corporates to use Web3 technology in a serious way. And the European Union is funding now the so-called data space initiatives, where they want to provide money to corporates and governments to build decentralized structures and data spaces which allow you to, ultimately enable all these use cases which you also saw on the previous page. And there's data spaces now emerging in Germany, the mobility data space, for example, but also on the European level. There was a study done which detected more than 120 data space initiatives across Europe. And the European Union also now understood we need to harmonize a little bit the way how it's done, so that actually all the different stakeholders can really benefit from it and make it more easy to exchange this data. Now, the idea is, in the end, these data spaces fuel use cases across the value chain, from systems and enabler to infrastructure to manufacturing to fleet operations, actually to mobility services. And I would say, however, the challenge is there are so many opportunities, it's hard to choose. And I believe also for a city or a mayor or any individual company, the question is, where do I bet my money on? The maturity, the technology is still not there yet, 100%. There are so many opportunities, but where should I get started? How should I focus on one and why? And I would now like to call Boyd on stage to talk a little bit about his journey, also from starting with a similar vision, as I understood, from creating the Internet of Mobility to then landing actually at a very specific application, Wheelcoin. And I have 2 slides, and you just let me know if you want to use them as a background to explain Wheelcoin and the Internet of Mobility. And then we open up for some questions. Boyd.
Hello, there we go. Jonas, thanks for the invite, and to PwC as well. We started IAMOB in 2018 here in Barcelona, actually. And IAMOB stands for the Internet of Mobility. And our vision back then was clearly several years too early, which was to build a decentralized Internet of Mobility network. The concept behind IAMOB was always that, and I actually still believe this, and it really ties into what Jonas said in terms of where technology is evolving and the value of leveraging decentralized technology for mobility. Here's the future state I still believe is going to happen, and this is why we started IMOB in the beginning. We have, in mobility around the world, tens of thousands of private and shared mobility fleets. All of them independently owned and operated, all of them with their own apps, and all of them trying to own their own user base. Then we have tens of thousands of rail operators and public transit agencies and operators. Also, they all have their own apps. Then you have growing, massive, and small peer-to-peer sharing platforms. He mentioned that as well. So your private vehicle can now be part of a peer-to-peer car sharing network. Your private bike could be as well, and we've seen some initiatives around that. So if we want to optimize mobility for quality of life and sustainability in our cities, we need to break down these barriers, these silos that we see in the Web 2 world, which is everybody needs to own their own user with their own mobile interface and their own sort of customer base, and they're all siloed and there's no seamless integration of them. Furthermore, one of the other benefits of blockchain for this that ties directly into the vision is how can you make inclusive access to a network effect available to small startups or small organizations. Let me give you an example. You're going to leave this expo in whatever time, in 2 hours. Now, you should take transit, but if you're not going to take transit and you might want a ride hailing or taxi, what would your de facto, most of you aren't from Barcelona, right? So what are you likely to do first? Open your Uber app. Okay. Why is that a concern? Well, Uber has such a critical mass of adoption. They can manipulate prices. They can do surge pricing. There's a lot of criticism. And actually, we work with Uber, so I'm not trying to criticize Uber. This is not a complaint about Uber. It's the market dynamics that people just assume, okay, I'll go to my default app, Uber. Why is that a problem besides the fact that we're giving them too much power? The other problem, many problems that emerge from this, is what if the nearest Uber vehicle is 12 minutes from here? All right, fine, book the Uber. What if Julia's taxi fleet, which is a luxury EV taxi fleet, she has 12 vehicles in her fleet. She's based in Barcelona, and she's got a car a block away. You have no idea that that vehicle's there waiting for you, similar price, green, and instead of waiting 12 minutes for Uber, you're waiting 1 minute because she's got a car right outside here. You don't know that because the market dynamics of Web 2 benefit the big behemoths in ways that actually result in inferior customer experience and lower sustainability in our cities, because now Uber's sending a vehicle 12 minutes, creating more traffic, more emissions in our city than are necessary, when Julia's taxi, which she could use better exposure to get more customers, and the customer would be improved by having that. So the vision of this decentralized Internet of Mobility network is, if you can make it easy and seamless for any mobility service operator of any size, or even you as a private vehicle owner, to post your vehicle to this network, and if this network is accessible to be used as like a middleware for any organization in the world that wants to plug it into their own mobility app, say you came here on British Airways, and British Airways gives you loyalty points when you book mobility services when you travel. Well, if British Airways is tapped into this Internet of Mobility network, then you don't have to find Julia's taxis and discover them and download her app. If she's made her vehicles available to this global interoperable mobility network, you get access to it. So this is the big vision behind IMOB, the decentralized mobility network. In blockchain, we talk about permissionless. The idea is, can you be permissionlessly connected as a supplier to this network? And if you can do that, you can optimize mobility networks and quality of life for everyone. So this was the vision behind IMOB. We started in 2018. we built 100,000 lines of code all in Web 2 with some experiments in Web 3 blockchain. And as Jonas and I were talking about beforehand, and he mentioned, technology in blockchain are still getting to the point where you can scale a solution like this. There's still a lot of friction points in terms of onboarding suppliers to a decentralized network, in terms of their own business model, their own understanding of blockchain, et cetera. So we ended up building it all as a Web 2 platform. It's deployed inside mobile apps of rail operators and transit agencies right now, but as a Web 2 solution, I still believe the future is what I just described. I'm just not exactly sure when we'll get there. We have it in a test net in blockchain right now, but the market's not ready, so we're still deploying it as a Web 2 solution. So that's from 2018 to 2022, that was all we did. Last year, as Jonas knows, you can go to the next slide, if that other slide. Yes. So for those of you familiar with MaaS, Mobility as a Service, right? There's been this for 10 plus years, there's been this discussion about the levels of MaaS, from level 0 to level 4. Level 0 is everything is chaotic, everybody has their own app, everyone has their own users, there's no interoperability, no connectivity between different services. That's level 0. And as you go up the chain to level 2 and 3, you start to have more seamless integration of mobility services. So if I want to go from here to Sagrada Familia, I can plug in a journey planner that will give me a combined multimodal journey that says walk to this train station. When you get to Plaza Catalunya, you can either take a bike share this distance or you can take something else. Level 3 is you can pay for all those things inside one app, so you don't need to pay for them in all separate apps. And, actually, level 2 is about paying for them all. Level 3 is about being able to do that in a bundle. So, like, I can pay for a subscription and have unlimited access to certain mobility services throughout the month with a subscription. Level 4 that no one has meaningfully achieved yet of MaaS is how do you embed societal incentives inside a MaaS experience. That is inclusive access to mobility for lower income people. That is how do we accelerate the adoption of greener, lower carbon mobility. And that's where Wheelcoin came in. So we've been building and deploying IAMOB as a level 2.5-ish MaaS platform, but not solving meaningfully the societal incentives part, and no one has. So we said, you know what, we already have experience in blockchain, we already have deep experience in digitizing mobility. Why don't we apply all of our knowledge and capabilities and try to experiment around how you solve level 4, which is this point around societal incentives, particularly accelerating the adoption of green mobility and making mobility more accessible to more people. So the idea is, it's not an idea, it's an app. We deployed it last year. Users download the app. If the user authorizes the app to track their movements, like your fitness app does, we have a detection system in the app that detects automatically. You don't have to tell the app what you're doing. The app detects if you're walking, biking, in a car, in a train, in a bus, on a boat or ferry, or on a plane. And we did a formula, just a basic algorithm, basically looking at sort of currently it's global averages of emissions per kilometer traveled by each mode. And you earn Wheelcoin, which is an on-chain crypto token for free for saving emissions from your mobility choices. And then what can you do with it? We like to call it air miles for green mobility because it's like an air miles, but instead of air miles you earn for contaminating the planet, Wheelcoin you earn for being greener and reducing emissions in the planet by choosing greener mobility options. And just like air miles, where you can take your air miles and burn them or exchange them for discounts, you can do the same thing in Wheelcoin. So that's kind of where we are right now, and happy to have a discussion.
I mean, first of all, thank you very much for giving this journey through your company and IMOP and Wheelcoin. Maybe I start with one question, and then I think also in terms of timing, basically we open up the floor for some questions from the audience. So when you launched this app, I was really super excited, and also to see basically how it was gaining traction. My first question back then was already, how do you create critical mass in one city, right? Because if you launch something global, you might have a few users across the world, but individually, still mobility is often a local thing, right? And if you want to get this off the ground, you need to have the demand side up, of course, in terms of users, but also the supply side. So something which you can do with your coins. How are you approaching this, and maybe also reflecting on what you planned last year and where you stand today? What were some lessons learned on that?
Yeah, we started with, so we were getting kind of frustrated with the slow pace of sales of the Internet of Mobility as a mobility platform, because it's enterprise sales to very large public and private transit operators, rail operators, and we all know what that means in terms of sales cycles and everything. As startup founders, we want to see, acceleration, velocity. And our deal is, well, with Wheelcoin, let's go B2C, so we don't have a complex sales cycle, and let's just get it out to the world. The problem with that, as you all know, is like there's 100 million apps in the world, and how do you just get your app attention? And going back to our roots, what we ended up deciding, which is a lesson learned and kind of directly addressing your question, which is, if we really want this to scale, we do need to have some kind of city-by-city component to it, including localized discounts for people. We've embedded these cool, it doesn't show up on here, but we have these cool AI-generated, they're like NFTs. They're digital collectibles you can get in different cities for doing things, burning your wheel coin. So there is a local component to this to succeed, and one of our strategies is going through cities now. But because we've worked with cities so often, we know how painful it can be in terms of the tendering process and all the rest, that we've started with this model where we can, depending on the context, we can offer the city free collaboration with us in return for promoting the app to their residents. Then they help us get discounts. We did a trial of this in Skåne in Sweden with a 3-city area where they allowed users to get discounts on transit cards by burning wheel coins. So you go back to this level 4 MOS and embedding societal incentives that's both around green and inclusivity. You're actually making it more inclusive and accessible to gain more access to transit by using wheel coin, because you get discounts on green mobility services, so it's more affordable. So I think one path going forward is to go more direct through cities in collaboration partnerships.
Thank you. Then let's open up now to the audience, and I just hand over the micro.
Boyd, fascinating. I didn't hear you, as you proliferate through a world where many services, small businesses can sign up and begin to offer incentivized services to citizens and so on. You didn't talk about trust. And one of the things about what's favoring the big is that they do have the ability to drive accountability for bad behavior. Talk about trust in this.
Yeah, no, that's a tricky one. When you talk about a decentralized global mobility network where you could have, like the big vision, right? You have your Tesla car here, but you've parked it over here, and it's there for 8 hours while you're at the event. You turn it on to the network so that anyone under certain conditions can actually take your car during that period, as long as you say, okay, the car needs to be back here by 5:45 because I'm leaving at 6, and it can be used under whatever commercial terms you've decided. But then trust on both sides. Like, okay, I'm interested in using that Tesla, but I don't know this owner. I don't know what condition the car's in. The owner doesn't know me. How can he feel confident that I'm not going to wreck the car or steal the car? Obviously, there's things around this, around insurance. A lot of the peer-to-peer networks have already addressed this really well. Any of you have heard of BlaBlaCar, used BlaBlaCar? They're a really good example of a scaled business around peer-to-peer carpooling in that scenario, where they've embedded trust into the technology solution in ways, for example, like obviously user records, user behavior, user ratings that are highly valued. It's like Airbnb as well, right? Like, how many of you have used Airbnb? The first thing I do is I'll often like say, I only want any place that's at least 4-star rated by other people, right? So you have to really rely on that, though, and there are risks around it. You can have insurance, which is a backstop, and then you can have these sort of digital tools that actually facilitate improved trust, but there are risks compared to saying, for example, I'm just going to go in an Uber because I know Uber is safe.
Other questions? Yep.
You mentioned Tesla as an example,
Yeah.
and I heard that a similar concept they are thinking about doing themselves. like what's their benefit to open up these silos that you mentioned at the beginning and not just do it for themselves?
Yeah, so the world is going to go here whether the companies want them to or want it to or not, and the reason is it's superior from every other part. It's the best optimization for users, and cities are going to increasingly encourage, and he mentioned some of the sort of data initiatives in Europe around mobility, and we're starting to see already cities starting to require that. Actually, in Belgium, they did this a while ago now. They require that third-party MSPs, mobility service providers, open up their data to allow third-party platforms to support booking and payment of their services outside their own walled garden. I am 100% convinced over the next 10 years in many cities around the world, if not most of the important ones, it will be a legal requirement for any mobility operator to have a license to operate. They will have to, under certain conditions, expose their vehicles and services to third-party booking platforms. Why? Because it's superior for the user. It creates more competitive parity. It enables better pricing and more inclusivity. And it facilitates what is needed, which is optimizing our mobility network so that people can more easily choose the best and most sustainable option to go door to door. So your question is valid. Like, the average big company doesn't want to do this right now because they want to own their customer, they want to own their user. But, you know, I mentioned Uber before in a critical way. My company, IAMOB, has a global partnership with Uber. Uber's embedded into the IAMOB network, and they're deployed in our third-party solutions in different markets. And you say, why would Uber do that? They're a monopoly. They don't need us. The thing is, we're deploying in very large organizations like London Northeastern Rail. They have 20 million annual passengers. Brightline Trains down in Florida, they have a couple million passengers going from Miami to Orlando. As a result of that, there are customers that they would not tap into if it weren't for our technology, because some customers don't have Uber on their phone, believe it or not. Or they wouldn't think about Uber as a last mile to the train. But now that it's integrated on our platform and connected to Brightline's own mobile app, it's seamless for the user. So there's value for the operator.
And maybe to build on this, I think it depends a bit on the business model of the company. So for Tesla, as long as they are still in the business of selling cars, they don't necessarily care about utilization of the asset. But if you are more in the operator space, and you see it with all the scooter players, for them a key driver to profitability is utilization of the asset. And what you can see in particular in Germany, even without having it mandatory by the cities, a lot of the micromobility players open up the interface, and now through the Sixt One app, you can basically book all the scooters and car sharing operators. The same with Free Now. So they're starting basically to open up already just to get the utilization up. But I agree with you. Over time, also the regulatory push will further increase that. Well, I think we're almost coming to an end. Half an hour is
kicking us
by.
off.
Yeah. So any last question? If not, I would hand over back to Heiko to wrap it up. But one small question. Okay.
So in Germany, I know that many companies, they didn't want to open up, like also public transport companies, because they know Google Maps, for example, is already really strong and really big competitor also here in Barcelona. Everyone uses Google Maps. So if they get even more data, all the data they can get, will not just the big companies get even stronger if they have all the services integrated into, for example, Google Maps? And will it be really difficult to compete with them now?
Yes. That's one of the elephants in the room is Uber or Google Maps that's installed in billions of devices doing all this as well. But real quick, though, this is worth mentioning. In our deployments, we've already seen this with our clients. There are reasons no matter how good Google Maps is, you still might use your rail app. You might use your Deutsche Bahn app, even if Google Maps allows you to book Deutsche Bahn. Why? Because Deutsche Bahn has knowledge and data that Uber will never have, because they have the real time, the best information that's not all accessible to any third-party operator, because Deutsche Bahn can say, you know what, we're offering an arrangement now. If you book your door-to-door journey between Berlin and wherever in the Deutsche Bahn app, you earn points, and those points can be used for things. Well, if you do the whole seamless journey door-to-door, you're going to get more benefits. My point is, I think what will happen over time is, yes, this network will be decentralized and permissionless, meaning Uber will have as much access to it as John's startup over here who's launching a new super app. But it will be the operator behind that app's responsibility to figure out how do they attract and retain and create value for their customers around this mobility network, so they can still compete even if multiple apps, including behemoths like Uber or Google, have the same solution.
Thank you so much, everyone. One more question. All right, one last question. Short question, short answer.
I'm inspired by the question of Jaron when it comes to Google Maps. So imagine there is an alternative for Google Maps where the data will stay by the user and where the data will stay by the suppliers behind this solution. Will that receive a warm welcome if something of this technology is there?
If I understand the question, it's tied to sort of how much users value their data being private and not being owned and operated by Google, who can then manipulate it. I would say, unfortunately, what we're seeing from consumer behavior and user behavior is they do not seem to value privacy of their data nearly as much as regulators and we all think they should.
Too bad.
I think that the answer is usability eats privacy for lunch. Still true, unfortunately, but might change. Let's see.
Are there any additional questions? No, wait, if this is a good conversation, we should keep it going, right? Any other additional questions? No? Well then, thank you so much, Boyd. Thank you so much, Jonas, for joining us today.